the streets of Delta State never slept. Cars honked, people shouted, and the air smelled of roasted corn and fuel. In the middle of it all was Tony, a man in his late 30s, walking back from another long day of work. His shirt was soaked with sweat, his shoes covered in dust. He was tired, not just physically but in his soul. Tony was a graduate, but life had not been kind. He had tried everything: teaching, selling phone accessories, driving a taxi, even working in a small restaurant. Yet, no matter how hard he worked, nothing changed. His tiny one-room apartment had a leaking roof, his clothes were worn out, and his stomach often grumbled from hunger. His neighbors laughed at him. They called him Professor Hunger because, despite his degree, he was still struggling. They would always mock him as he walked past them every day. No one wanted to be his friend. People avoided him like he was cursed. Tony was good-looking, but what did that matter? Women wanted stability. A man who could take care of them. Not someone who barely had enough for himself. Every time he approached a lady, she would smile politely, then find an excuse to leave. He had stopped trying. Tony had learned to live with disappointment. It was like a shadow that followed him everywhere, whispering in his ear, reminding him that he was not good enough. But he refused to listen. He had dreams, and no amount of mockery or rejection would make him give up. Every morning, he woke up before sunrise, determined to change his fate. He applied for jobs, learned new skills online, and even tried small businesses, selling snacks, fixing phones, and running errands for people. But nothing seemed to work. The worst part. Love was a battle he never won. Whenever he met a woman, things started well. They laughed, talked, and shared their dreams. But the moment they found out where he lived or heard the cruel jokes people made about him, everything changed. One by one, they disappeared. One evening, as he sat outside his room, he heard the loud laughter of his neighbors. They were making jokes about him again. Tony clenched his fist. He refused to let their words define him. He was more than their insults. That night, he made a promise to himself. He would prove them wrong. He would rise above their expectations. No matter how hard life got, he would never give up. Because deep inside, he knew his story was not over yet. Tony had grown used to the whispers, the laughter, the way people looked at him like he was invisible. But everything changed the day Anita moved into the next compound. She was different. Young, beautiful, and full of life, Anita had a presence that turned heads wherever she went. Unlike most people in the neighborhood, she didn't carry an air of judgment. She greeted everyone with warmth, made friends easily, and had a way of making even the dullest moments feel bright. Tony never thought someone like her would notice him. But she did. At first, it was just curiosity. She had heard the rumors, the cruel jokes people made about Professor Hunger, the man who had a degree but couldn't afford a good life. She listened but didn't see what they saw. Instead, she saw a man with kind eyes, a man who worked harder than anyone she had ever met, a man who, despite his struggles, never lost hope. She saw his heart. One evening, as Tony sat outside, lost in thought, Anita walked up to him with 2 plates of food. They ate together that evening, talking about life, dreams, and everything in between. And before long, those shared meals turned into long conversations, walks around the neighborhood, and laughter Tony hadn't experienced in years. Then, love happened. It was unexpected, beautiful, and undeniable. But not everyone was happy. Neighbors whispered, friends warned, and people laughed even louder. They told Anita she was wasting her time, that Tony would never amount to anything. But Anita didn't care. Time passed, and Anita never wavered. Despite the endless whispers, the side glances, and the mocking laughter, she stood by Tony. Years of love, struggles, and hope strengthened their bond. She watched Tony push through life's challenges, refusing to break under the weight of poverty and rejection. She saw his determination, his kindness, and his dreams, and she knew without a doubt this was the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. So, when Tony finally asked her to marry him, she didn't hesitate. Yes, she said, smiling through tears. The news spread like wildfire. The entire neighborhood was in shock. Many refused to believe it at first. But when the wedding preparations began, reality sank in. She wasn't backing out. On the wedding day, the atmosphere was calm and intimate. Anita didn't want anything extravagant. She wanted something simple, something real. Her dress was elegant but modest. Tony wore a neatly pressed suit, one he had borrowed from a friend. The small hall was decorated with love, not luxury. Only close friends and family attended, those who truly believed in their love. But Anita wasn't listening to anyone who spoke bad about them. As she stood before Tony, looking into his eyes, she knew this was exactly where she was meant to be. And as they exchanged vows, promising to stand by each other no matter what, Tony felt something deep inside him shift. He wasn't alone anymore. For the first time in his life, someone had chosen him. After the wedding, something unexpected happened. The same people who once mocked Tony now wanted to be his friend. It started small. Neighbors who used to laugh at him suddenly greeted him with smiles. Some even stopped by his house, offering small favors, pretending they had always believed in him. The same men who once called him Professor Hunger now shook his hand, acting as if they had always respected him. But he didn't let it bother him. Life was changing, and he was grateful. Opportunities started coming his way. He got a stable job in a reputable company, and with Anita's support, he started his own small business. Slowly but surely, they built a comfortable life together. Then, 5 years later, their greatest blessing arrived, twin babies, a boy and a girl. The news of their children spread fast. Everyone who once doubted their marriage was now full of praises. God has blessed them, they said. See how beautiful their children are. Their kids were the pride of the neighborhood, beautiful, brilliant, and full of life. Tony and Anita poured all their love into raising them. They ensured the twins had the best education, the happiest childhood, and a home filled with love. Their family became a symbol of happiness, something people admired and envied. Soon, whispers of jealousy replaced the old mockery. The envy in people's hearts grew, and not everyone wished them well. But Tony and Anita didn't notice. They were too busy loving their children, too focused on their happiness. Anita had always believed in Tony. She had stood by him when no one else did, loved him when the world turned its back on him. But now, the man she once knew was changing before her eyes. It started gradually. At first, he became distracted, lost in his thoughts even when he was at home. Then, he started coming home late. She would wait for him, sometimes until midnight, but he never had any explanations. She tried to understand, but soon, it became worse. He stopped spending time with the children, barely noticed them when they ran up to him. Dinners became silent, their conversations short. He became impatient, quick to anger. One night, when he came home past midnight, Anita confronted him about why his attitude changed all of a sudden. And instead of answering, he snapped. Days passed, and she noticed the whispers in the neighborhood. People talked in hushed tones whenever she walked by. Something was wrong. Then, one afternoon, while buying groceries, she overheard two women talking and gossiping about Tony marrying a second wife. Anita felt her heart stop. She didn't believe it at first. The Tony she knew would never do such a thing. But doubt crept in. Some days later, she waited for him to return. As soon as he stepped into the house, she confronted him seeking answers. I deserve a second wife. I have money now, and I want to enjoy my life, he yelled at her. But despite the tears that filled Anita's eyes, Tony didn't care. I've made my decision and that's final. So he left her in tears. That evening, darkness filled Anita's heart. Months of pain, betrayal, and loneliness had turned her into someone she no longer recognized. She had given Tony everything, her love, her loyalty, her life. And he had thrown it all away like it meant nothing. Every day, she watched him come home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. He barely looked at her, barely acknowledged their children. He had changed, and no matter how much she begged, he never looked back. The love she once had for him turned into something else. Hatred, regret, and pains. She blamed herself for not listening to the warnings. If only she had never married him. If only she had seen the truth earlier. And then, a thought took root in her mind, one that wouldn't leave. Tony had abandoned her and the children emotionally. But what if she took away the one thing he never expected to lose? The children. If she couldn't have happiness, neither would he. That evening, as the sun set, Anita moved like a woman possessed. She cooked their favorite meal, her hands steady, her mind clear. As she stirred the pot, she reached into a small paper bag and took out the poison she had bought from a street vendor days ago. It was strong, deadly, and undetectable. She mixed it in carefully, making sure it dissolved completely. Then, she called the children to the table. Her beautiful twins, the ones she had once loved more than life itself, sat down happily. They ate, laughing and talking, completely unaware of what their mother had done. Minutes passed. Then, one of them, the boy, coughed. The girl groaned, clutching her belly. Anita sat still, watching as her children collapsed to the floor, their small bodies shaking, their faces twisted in pain. Her hands trembled, but she didn't move to help them. And in that silence, as she stared at their lifeless bodies, the weight of her actions crushed her. Anita's scream pierced through the night, raw and filled with horror. The moment she saw her children lifeless on the floor, reality crashed down on her. What had she done? How had she allowed her pain to drive her to this? Neighbors rushed in, drawn by her scream. What they saw left them frozen in shock. The twins, innocent, beautiful, lay lifeless on the cold floor. The smell of their last meal still lingered in the air. Gasps filled the room. Some covered their mouths, others whispered in disbelief. Then the front door swung open, and Tony stepped inside. He had come home earlier than usual. But nothing could have prepared him for what he saw. His babies. His joy. Lying still. He froze. His mind refused to accept it. No, this can't be. His chest tightened, his vision blurred, and before anyone could reach him, Tony collapsed to the ground. Shouts erupted. Someone ran outside to call for help. But the damage had already been done. Tony slipped into a coma. Anita, broken and unable to explain herself, was arrested that same night. The police arrived, taking her away as she screamed. Days turned into weeks. Tony lay in the hospital, unconscious, lost in a world of darkness. The news of what happened spread beyond the neighborhood. People who once envied their family now pitied them. When Tony finally woke up, he was no longer the same man. The weight of his loss crushed him. His mind replayed memories of his children laughing, running to hug him when he returned home. But now, there was nothing. Just emptiness. He had once laughed at poverty. But this was true suffering. The guilt of what he had done to Anita, the pain of losing his children, the regret of his choices, it was unbearable. That's a great closing statement for your video. Thanks for watching my video today. I hope you've learned a valuable lesson from this story. I would love to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to drop a comment below. I'll be reading and interacting with you. If this is your first time here, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when I post more exciting African folktale stories. I can't wait to see you in my next video.